The village lay nestled between hills and dense forest, a place where stories carried as much weight as truth, and the whispers of neighbors often mattered more than justice itself. In this place of mud huts and flickering oil lamps, a young girl named Amara lived with her family. She was not born into wealth, nor was she given the kind of beauty that made men travel miles for her hand, yet there was something unusual in her, a glow in her spirit that often unsettled those closest to her. Her eyes carried a sharpness that suggested she saw more than others, and in her laughter was a freedom her family never knew. To the villagers, Amara was simply a dutiful daughter who fetched water, pounded grain, and sang to herself in the evenings. To her family, however, she was a resource, an untapped vein of fortune they were determined to exploit. Her father, a man hardened by years of disappointment, carried resentment for his station in life. He had gambled away the family's land and found no fortune in trade, and as debts piled higher, so did his bitterness. Her mother, once tender, had become a woman ruled by greed, envious of those who adorned themselves in golden necklaces and silk garments while she remained draped in coarse fabric. Amara's two brothers were no better, idle and cruel, feeding off scraps of schemes her father devised. The family looked at Amara not as blood, but as a key they had not yet turned. She was too spirited, too curious, too alive for their liking, and deep down they despised the light within her because it reminded them of everything they had lost. One evening, as the moonlight spilled over the thatched roof, her family gathered in hushed voices while Amara slept in the corner. The father spoke of a man from beyond the village, a stranger who had visited with eyes like burning coals and promises as heavy as gold. He had whispered of power and riches, of debts erased and luxuries delivered, in exchange for something precious. The father knew the price before the man even spoke. It was Amara. The girl whose soul shone too brightly, the girl whose life meant little to them but much to darker forces. The mother hesitated at first, but her hesitation was not out of love, it was out of fear of being cursed for betraying blood. Yet greed gnawed at her heart, and soon her protests gave way to silence. The brothers, eager for new clothing and weapons to flaunt in the village square, urged their father to accept the stranger's terms. And so, beneath the shadow of night, they made their pact. Amara would be given, her soul exchanged for the kind of wealth they had always hungered for. In the days that followed, the family's demeanor toward her shifted. They fed her better, spoke with false warmth, and even allowed her to rest more than usual. To Amara, this sudden kindness felt like sunlight after a storm, yet there lingered a strangeness in their eyes that she could not ignore. Her father avoided her gaze, her mother stroked her hair too often, and her brothers laughed nervously whenever she asked about the future. Deep inside, a whisper troubled her spirit, but she silenced it, believing perhaps her family had finally softened. What Amara did not know was that the village itself had already begun to sense something unholy. Crows gathered on rooftops, dogs howled at night, and the old women who read omens in smoke muttered warnings of a great sacrifice coming. But her family, blinded by greed, paid no mind to signs or conscience. They told themselves she was only one life, only one soul, and that her suffering would be their salvation. And so, in the heart of the village where betrayal hid beneath smiles and neighbors looked away from cruelty, the fate of Amara was sealed by the very people who should have been her shield. The night chosen for the meeting was unlike any other the village had seen. The air was heavy, pressed down upon the earth as though the sky itself had sunk closer. Not a single star burned in the heavens, and the moon hid her face behind a wall of clouds, refusing to witness what was about to unfold. Amara, unaware of the fate being plotted against her, lay asleep in the corner of her family's hut. Her breathing was steady, her face calm, as if she trusted the walls around her to keep her safe. Her family, however, did not sleep. They waited, their hearts pounding with a mixture of fear and anticipation, until the hour grew dark enough for their visitor to arrive. It began with a silence so complete that even the crickets ceased their song. Then came the sound of hooves, not the galloping of a horse, but the slow, deliberate thud of something heavier, each step making the earth quiver. The dogs in the village tucked their tails and whimpered, while the goats bleated faintly, straining against their ropes as though they sensed the approach of something unnatural. The air filled with the acrid stench of burning sulfur, and then, as if torn apart, the shadows split open at the edge of the village clearing. From that darkness he stepped forward. The devil was not entirely beast nor entirely man. His frame was tall, towering above the tallest of men, wrapped in a cloak that shimmered like black fire. Horns arched backward from his forehead, not grotesque but regal, as though he wore a crown carved from the bones of kings. His eyes glowed with an ember-red brilliance, burning holes in the night, and when he smiled, his teeth gleamed sharp and cold as if forged from steel. Yet, for all his terror, there was majesty in his presence, a charisma that demanded awe as much as fear. He was the kind of figure who could make men kneel not only from dread but from desire, for in his aura lay promises, of wealth, of power, of fulfillment of every hidden hunger. Amara's father stepped forward first, trembling but determined. He bowed low, sweat dripping from his brow, his words quivering in his throat. "We have what you asked for," he whispered. The devil's gaze moved lazily across the family, pausing on the mother, lingering on the brothers before settling on Amara, still asleep in the hut. His grin widened and the ground seemed to pulse beneath his feet. "She does not yet know," the devil said, his voice like the rumble of thunder rolling across the hills. "And that is good. Betrayal tastes sweetest when the victim still trusts." His words made the family shudder, yet they held their silence, bound by greed and fear. The devil raised his hand and a black flame curled from his palm. Within the fire flickered shapes, golden coins spilling over, fine garments, sprawling lands and cups brimming with wine. The family's eyes widened, drawn to the images, their greed tugging them closer. "This," the devil said smoothly, "is the wealth you have hungered for. But nothing is free. Her soul will be mine, eternally mine." The mother hesitated only briefly. And when do we receive what you promised?" she asked. The devil chuckled, a sound that made the trees bend as though bowing to him. "The moment her soul is marked, fortune will flow to your hands. But beware, those who bargain with me must live with the shadow of their choice." The father quickly nodded, ignoring the warning. He would have agreed to anything by then. The devil's attention returned to Amara. With a gesture, the shadows crept into the hut, curling around her body. She stirred in her sleep, frowning as though caught in a nightmare. Slowly, her eyes opened, and the first thing she saw was his towering figure framed in the doorway. Terror struck her heart, though she did not yet understand why. Her lips parted to scream, but no sound came. Her family stood behind him, silent, their faces twisted with guilt yet hardened by greed. The devil approached, each step deliberate, and knelt beside her. He extended one clawed finger, pressing it lightly against her chest. The touch burned, searing through her skin, and Amara gasped as pain shot through her veins. A black sigil bloomed across her chest, lines of fire etching themselves into her flesh, curling into a mark that pulsed with otherworldly power. She writhed, her body arching, but she could not escape. "It is done," the devil murmured, satisfaction thick in his tone. "Her soul belongs to the underworld. She will walk, she will breathe, but she will never be free." He straightened, the black flame in his hand vanishing. Her family watched, their eyes gleaming with the anticipation of wealth already promised. Amara, trembling and gasping for breath, stared at them in disbelief, her heart breaking as she realized it was their hands, not his, that had delivered her to this fate. The devil turned back toward the shadows, his cloak billowing like smoke. "Enjoy your riches," he said, his voice fading into the night. "For they are purchased at the highest price." And with that he was gone, leaving only the stench of sulfur, the echo of his laughter, and a girl forever marked as a child of betrayal. The night chosen for the ritual was one that no villager would forget, though none dared to speak of it openly afterward. The air was thick with an unnatural stillness, as though the forest itself held its breath, unwilling to witness what would take place. Clouds rolled heavily across the sky, smothering the moon and stars, leaving the earth cloaked in darkness. Not even the usual songs of insects pierced the silence. It was the kind of night where the air itself seemed to tremble with expectation, where every breath carried the weight of something waiting just beyond sight. Amara had been told by her mother that a ceremony was to be held in her honor, a ritual of blessing meant to ensure prosperity for the family. Though confusion filled her heart, she did not resist when they dressed her in white cloth and braided her hair with beads that clinked faintly in the silence. Her innocence and trust blinded her to the malice seething just beneath their smiles. She walked with them barefoot to the center of the clearing at the edge of the forest, not knowing that she was walking into the mouth of betrayal. At the clearing, a pit had been dug and lined with stones. Dry wood had been stacked in a circle, and strange symbols were painted onto the earth in ash and blood. At the center stood a stone altar, smooth and cold, waiting for her. The family had not worked alone. They had followed instructions given by the devil himself. Each line drawn into the dirt carried weight, each stroke whispered with darkness. Torches flickered around the circle, their flames unnaturally steady despite the cool wind that stirred the trees. Amara's father took her by the arm and led her toward the altar. She looked around nervously, her voice trembling. "Why is it so dark? Why are we out here?" Her mother forced a smile and stroked her cheek, though her touch felt more like a goodbye than comfort. "This is for you, child. For your future. Trust us." Amara wanted to believe, but a pit of dread had already begun to form in her stomach. Then the chanting began. Low at first, her father's voice muttered words in a tongue Amara had never heard before. Her brothers joined in, their voices weaving together in a harsh rhythm. Her mother raised her hands toward the sky and spoke the words with practiced precision, her tone carrying a sharpness that frightened Amara more than anything else. The sound grew louder, filling the night, echoing against the trees as though the forest itself had been dragged into their blasphemy. The flames of the torches flared, turning from orange to deep crimson, casting monstrous shadows that seemed to move on their own. Amara struggled as they laid her onto the altar, her body pressing against the cold stone. "What are you doing?" she cried, panic rising in her voice. "Please stop. I don't want this." But her pleas were swallowed by the chant, her cries drowned beneath the rhythm of betrayal. Her father's hands pinned her shoulders, her brothers held down her legs, and her mother placed a dagger at her side, not to kill but to mark the sacrifice. The devil's presence came slowly at first, like a wind curling through the trees, carrying with it the smell of sulfur and the distant roar of fire. Then, suddenly he was there, standing tall at the edge of the circle, his form both shadow and flame. The family did not flinch, instead they dropped to their knees in reverence. Amara turned her head and saw him, the same figure who had haunted her nightmares since the night he first touched her. Her heart thundered, her throat tightened, and tears blurred her vision. The devil extended his hand, and the flames around the circle leapt higher, twisting into the shape of writhing serpents. His voice rolled like thunder, commanding, "Eternal. Begin." Her mother raised the dagger and dragged its edge lightly across Amara's palm, letting the blood drip onto the stone. The drops hissed as they struck, as if the altar itself was thirsty. The chanting grew frenzied, faster and louder, until it no longer sounded human. Amara screamed, thrashing against their grip, but the devil's gaze locked her in place, rooting her soul even as her body fought. Then came the tearing. It was not physical, not something the eye could see, but Amara felt it deep inside her chest. A searing pain unlike any she had ever known ripped through her being, clawing at her very essence. She gasped for air, her mouth open in silent agony, as though invisible hands were reaching inside her, pulling something vital away. She saw visions, flashes of herself as a child laughing by the river, singing to the wind, dreaming of freedom, and each memory was yanked from her, devoured by the void that now claimed her soul. Her body arched, her voice finally breaking into a scream that rattled the leaves from the trees. The black sigil on her chest glowed, burning brighter with every heartbeat, until it seared itself into permanence. The family looked on, not with pity but with awe and greed, their eyes reflecting the fire that now marked their daughter as property of the underworld. Finally, with a sound like the tearing of cloth, it was done. Amara collapsed onto the stone, trembling, her chest rising and falling with shallow breaths. Her body lived, but inside she was hollow, her soul bound in chains she could not see. The devil smiled, satisfied, as the flames settled into a dim, eternal glow. He turned his gaze on the family, who bowed low before him, waiting for the riches promised. Amara opened her eyes and saw them, her father, her mother, her brothers, smiling not at her survival but at their victory. In that moment, her heart broke not because the devil had claimed her, but because her own blood had delivered her into his hands. Darkness pressed against her like a second skin, thick and endless, without horizon or ceiling. Amara opened her eyes but saw nothing, not even the faintest flicker of light. At first she thought she had gone blind, that the ritual had taken not only her spirit but her sight. She reached out, her fingers clawing at the air, expecting to feel the cool stone of the altar beneath her, but it was gone. Instead, her hands swept through emptiness. The surface beneath her body was neither soil nor stone, but something softer, like ash that gave way beneath her touch yet left no mark upon her skin. She sat up slowly, her breath shallow, her body trembling as though it remembered the tearing of her soul. Her chest burned, the sigil carved into her flesh pulsing with a dull ache that would not fade. She touched it, and though her fingers brushed her skin, it felt as though she were pressing against fire trapped beneath her ribs. Tears welled in her eyes, but when they fell, they disappeared into the void, swallowed without a trace. Amara whispered into the nothingness, her voice fragile. "Hello? Is anyone here?" Her words carried, but the echo was strange, too sharp as if the darkness itself were mocking her. She called again, louder, her desperation breaking through. "Please, someone?" But only the hollow repetition answered back, and soon even that faded, leaving her with silence so heavy it seemed to crush her chest. Panic surged and she scrambled to her feet. Her bare toes sank slightly into the ashen ground, yet no dust clung to her skin. She turned, trying to find direction, but every way looked the same, an endless expanse of black. She began to walk, her arms outstretched, hoping to touch something, anything. Each step echoed faintly, though the ground never shifted, never changed. She could not tell if she had walked for seconds or hours. Time here had no meaning. Her breaths grew sharp and ragged, her pulse frantic as she realized there was no end to this place. Her thoughts turned back to the clearing, to the fire, to the faces of her family. The memory stabbed deeper than the sigils burn. She saw again their eyes, shining not with love but with greed, as the devil marked her. The truth crushed her chest. They had not been tricked, they had not been forced. They had given her willingly. Her lips trembled as she whispered their names, but even that felt useless here. There was no comfort in calling for those who had betrayed her. Exhausted, she sank to her knees. Her body shook with sobs that seemed to vanish the moment they left her throat. Even her grief felt stolen. She pressed her forehead to the ground, whispering prayers to God she no longer believed would hear her. She prayed for freedom, for forgiveness, for an end, but only silence answered, thick and suffocating. Then from far away came a sound. At first she thought it was the echo of her own heartbeat, but it grew louder, distinct. A low whisper like wind threading through a hollow cave. She lifted her head, her tears glistening on her cheeks though no light reflected them. The whisper grew into many voices, layered, murmuring in tongues she didn't recognize. They overlapped, a chorus of the damned, sorrowful and sharp, and though she couldn't understand the words, she felt their meaning. They were lost souls like her, bound to this place, caught between death and eternity. Fear prickled her skin, but beneath it stirred recognition. She was not alone. She stumbled to her feet, listening closely. The voices were not outside her. They were inside, circling through her chest, wrapping around the hollow space where her soul had been torn away. They spoke directly into her, their tones shifting from sorrow to warning, from warning to rage. She clutched her head, her nails digging into her scalp, trying to silence them, but they only grew stronger. The whispers filled her veins, her lungs, her very breath, until she thought she would suffocate. And then as suddenly as they came, they hushed. One voice, deeper than the rest, lingered. It spoke a single word in her tongue. Bound, the word rang through her like a bell, vibrating against her bones. She gasped, her knees giving way, and she collapsed again into the ash. Bound, that was what she was. Neither alive nor dead, neither free nor completely enslaved. She belonged to the underworld now, a vessel that could walk and breathe, but without the light of her own soul. Her mind reeled. If she was bound, then there was no escape, not in death, not in prayer, not even in time. Her family had taken her future and chained it to the devil's will. The despair that washed over her was heavier than any stone. She lay there, staring into the void that stared back, and for a moment she considered surrendering, letting herself dissolve into the ash until nothing remained. But even that, she realized bitterly, was not hers to choose. Still, something flickered beneath the despair, small but stubborn. The whispers had revealed something, if only by accident. She was bound, yes, but that meant she still existed. She was not erased, not yet. Somewhere within this hollow shell, some part of her remained, enough to feel anger, enough to mourn, enough to breathe. And if she still breathed, then perhaps she could endure. The devil might have claimed her soul, but her body still moved, her heart still beat. That was something. With trembling hands she pushed herself up once more. The darkness remained endless, the whispers coiled like snakes within her chest, but she forced herself to stand against it. She had been betrayed, shattered, hollowed, but she was not gone. She did not yet know how, but some part of her swore she would find a way to rise from this place, even if it meant clawing through shadow and fire itself. For the first time since the ritual, she whispered not for help, but for herself. "I am still here." The words were fragile, barely audible, yet they rang true. And though the darkness gave no reply, it seemed to pause as though listening. The whispers did not fade. They grew, curling around Amara like unseen chains, filling the hollow in her chest where her soul had been torn away. At first, they were chaos, dozens of voices murmuring at once, a cacophony of grief and rage that threatened to unravel her mind. She pressed her hands to her ears, but it made no difference. The sound did not come from outside. It was inside her, threading through her veins, clawing at her heart. She screamed into the emptiness, her cry raw and broken, but the darkness swallowed her voice the way it swallowed everything. Then slowly the chaos sharpened. The voices began to align, not in harmony but in order. A rhythm formed, like waves crashing against a shore. She could almost distinguish words now, syllables carved in anguish, phrases choked by sorrow. They spoke in tongues both familiar and strange, languages from centuries long gone, the speech of kingdoms that had burned into dust. Yet somehow she understood, not with her ears but with the raw nerve of her soul's absence. The knowledge sank into her like venom, and once she grasped it, there was no turning away. The first truth they gave her was the nature of her prison. Neither alive nor dead, they hissed, each syllable dragging like a chain. Bound, marked, claimed. They told her she had no place in the world of the living, for her soul had been carved away. And she had no place among the dead, for her body yet drew breath. She was suspended between realms, cursed to linger in shadow until the devil called her fully into his dominion. Eternity stretched ahead like an endless desert with no oasis, a torment of emptiness from which no prayer could save her. Her body trembled as the weight of it sank in. She wanted to cover her ears again to silence them, but their truth dug deep. She saw flashes of others before her, men and women who had also been betrayed, children sold for wealth, warriors who had bartered glory, leaders who had sacrificed their people. All of them marked, all of them trapped in the same dark limbo. Their agony became her vision, and she felt their pain as though it was her own. She clutched her chest, gasping, the sigil burning with each memory they poured into her. But within their torment was also warning. They spoke of what awaited if she surrendered. Eternal suffering, they breathed. Chains that cut, fire that does not consume, silence that devours thought. They told her of the pits where souls wailed forever, clawing at walls of flame that only grew tighter the more they struggled. They described the emptiness of losing every memory, every fragment of self, until one became nothing but shadow serving the devil's will. Amara shivered violently, her body curling against the ash beneath her. She could not bear the thought of becoming nothing, of her name and laughter dissolving into the underworld's endless night. And yet, between their warnings, some voices wove a different thread. Not all were resigned. Some whispered with bitterness, others with fire still clinging to their tones. They spoke not only of despair but of a secret few had dared to seek. There is a crack in the binding, they murmured, their tones urgent, insistent. A loophole hidden in the devil's law. The words tightened her chest, forcing her to sit upright despite her trembling limbs. She listened harder, desperate, her breath shallow as she strained to catch every syllable. They told her that though the devil claimed souls absolutely, he was bound by rules older than himself, laws written in the bones of creation, laws he could not break without unraveling his power. A soul marked was his, yes, but a marked soul could bargain. The devil thrived on deals, contracts spun from blood and desire. And though those contracts almost always favored him, the very act of bargaining left a sliver of choice. If one dared, if one had the strength, they could attempt to twist the bargain to their advantage. It was dangerous, for failure meant falling deeper into his grasp, but it was not impossible. Amara's heart pounded. Hope flickered, fragile but real. The whispers warned her immediately, their tones fierce. Beware. Many have tried. Few have succeeded. The devil is cunning, his words are traps, his gifts poisoned. He twists every desire until it destroys you. They showed her visions of those who had attempted to outwit him. A warrior who bargained for immortality but became a statue of stone, a queen who begged for endless wealth only to drown beneath mountains of gold she could not spend, a child who wished for freedom and was hurled into the void where no soul could reach him. Amara's stomach turned, but the seed had been planted. A loophole. A chance, however small. She did not yet know what she could bargain for, nor how she could keep her mind sharp against his venomous words, but she knew one thing. She could not remain in this limbo. She could not accept eternal suffering without fighting. Her hands shook as she pressed them to the burning mark on her chest. It pulsed beneath her touch as though alive. She closed her eyes and whispered into the void, not to the voices, not to herself, but to the devil she knew could hear her anywhere. If I am bound, then let me speak. If I am yours, then let me bargain. I will not wither here. I will not be silent. The whispers stirred violently, some in approval, others in fear. The deeper voice, the one that had first named her bound, rumbled again. Be careful, child. Deals are knives. One edge may cut your chains. The other may slit your throat. Amara's lips trembled, but she did not falter. In the endless dark, where despair and warning wrapped around her, she clung to the smallest thread of defiance. If there was a loophole, she would find it. If there was a chance to twist the devil's law, she would take it. She might be bound, broken, and betrayed, but she was not yet defeated. And as her whispered vow echoed into the vast silence, the darkness seemed to shift, listening once more. Somewhere, far away, she felt a smile curl in the shadows, as though the devil himself had been waiting for her to say those words. The darkness around her thickened, pressing down like a suffocating weight, until it split open with a chilling laugh that echoed across the void. It was not the laugh of a man, nor even of a beast, but something older, sharper, carrying centuries of malice within its hollow timbre. The air trembled, and from the shadows emerged a figure cloaked in fire and ash, his eyes smoldering like dying coals. The devil himself had come, drawn by the stubborn heartbeat that refused to die in her chest. "You are a strange one," he said, voice dripping with mockery, each word striking like a blade. "Your soul was mine the moment they offered it, torn from your flesh and shackled here. Yet you still cling to the idea of being more than a husk. Tell me, little girl, do you still dream of freedom? Do you still believe in hope?" His presence was overwhelming. Every whisper of his movement filled the realm with firelight, every step making the shadows writhe like serpents around her. He towered above her broken form, smirking as though the entire underworld existed for his amusement. She wanted to cower, to bow, to admit defeat, but something deep inside, something raw and burning, forced her chin up. "I will not beg," she said, her voice trembling but unyielding. "You may have my soul, but you will not have my surrender." For a moment, silence stretched between them, heavy as stone. Then the devil laughed again, a roar of mirthless joy that shook the ground. "How precious," he sneered. "A mortal who thinks defiance means anything here. Do you not see? You are mine. You exist because I allow it. You breathe because I find it entertaining. Your courage," he leaned closer, his breath smelling of sulfur and rot, "is nothing more than a candle in the storm waiting to be snuffed out." She met his gaze, her entire being screaming in terror, but her eyes did not waver. "And yet you haven't snuffed it out," she whispered. For the first time his smirk faltered. The weight of her words settled between them, subtle but undeniable. He had expected begging, despair, the breaking of her will. Instead, she stood before him like a fragile reed that refused to bend even as the storm raged. Something about it unnerved him, though he masked it with another mocking grin. "You amuse me," he admitted, circling her like a predator. "Most souls collapse within moments. They scream, they claw, they cry for mercy, and he gestured to the abyss where faint screams echoed from unseen torments, "I give them none. But you think you're different." "I don't think," she said quietly, her voice sharpening, "I know." Her defiance was like a spark in a sea of endless night. He chuckled, shaking his head, dismissing her as foolish but still intrigued. "You are nothing but a pawn in a game you cannot even begin to understand." And yet, his grin widened, though his eyes narrowed with interest. "Perhaps I shall let you wander a little longer. Perhaps I want to see how long your courage lasts before it rots into despair." He leaned so close she could feel the fire beneath his skin. "But remember this, every step you take, every breath you draw here, is because I choose to allow it. And when I decide to crush you, it will be as effortless as extinguishing dust." With that, the flames around him flared, engulfing the shadows in a blinding light, and then he was gone, his laughter lingering long after his form had vanished. She stood trembling, her body weak, her soul frayed, but her spirit, unyielding, remained intact. He had mocked her, tried to break her with words, but instead he had revealed something vital. He underestimated her. And that, she realized with a flicker of grim determination, was his first mistake. The whispers that had guided her through the suffocating corridors of the underworld grew sharper, as though the spirits themselves knew she was nearing the heart of something forbidden. Their voices slithered like smoke around her, hissing fragments of riddles, warnings, and promises. "The path is carved in pain," one moaned. "A pact not meant for mortals," another sighed. But among the warnings a thread of hope glimmered, faint but undeniable. She walked along a jagged obsidian floor that reflected no light, though torches of ghostly blue flame lined the walls. Ahead, a vast chamber yawned open, its ceiling stretching into shadow, and at its center stood a throne wrought of bones fused together by fire. Upon it sat a figure cloaked in crimson and shadow, the devil himself. His lips curled into a knowing smile when her eyes dared to meet his. "Ah," he drawled, his voice thick with amusement, "the little mortal who dares to stand upright after I've torn her soul in half. How quaint." Her body trembled, but she did not bow. "You think you've won," she said, voice hoarse but steady. but I'm still here. And I will not be your plaything. The devil laughed, the sound echoing through the cavern like 1,000 screams released at once. Defiance. Always the same with your kind. You burn so brightly even when you're already ash. He leaned forward, eyes gleaming like molten gold. Tell me, what do you hope for here? A second chance? Redemption? Escape? Her silence was her answer, and his smirk deepened. You amuse me, he said, drumming his long clawed fingers against the armrest of his throne. Most who wander this far collapse into despair. But you bite even as your chains tighten. That hunger, that refusal, it almost makes me want to play. His words wrapped around her like a net, pulling her closer until the air itself seemed to push her forward. She stepped into the circle of shadow beneath his throne, the whispers of the spirits clinging to her like hands urging her onward. There is a loophole, she said suddenly, her voice trembling but sharp. The others spoke of it. A way to change what's been written. The devil stilled. His grin faltered, though only for a heartbeat, before it widened again into something more dangerous. Ah, so they told you. His tone was a mixture of mockery and intrigue. Those damned souls whisper too much. Yes, there exists a pact. But it is not for mortals. It is a blade that cuts both ways, and I enjoy watching mortals bleed. Tell me, she pressed. Her fists clenched, nails biting into her palms. What is this pact? He rose from his throne, towering over her, his shadow swallowing her whole. The air grew heavier, the torches flickering violently as if afraid. The forbidden deal, he said at last, his voice a low growl, was sealed long before your kind crawled out of the mud. It was meant for demons who faltered, not for fragile humans. But, if you insist. He circled her slowly, like a predator toying with prey. You wish to rewrite your fate? Then you must prove yourself useful. The underworld has tasks too dangerous, too foul, even for demons. If you succeed where they fail, the laws of fire and blood will allow me to renegotiate your soul's path. Her throat tightened. And if I fail? The devil's grin stretched unnaturally wide. Then you will not suffer as the others do. No, little mortal. You will be unmade. Not even dust will remember you. Your screams will vanish before they leave your throat. The chamber seemed to tilt, the weight of his words pressing her down, but she did not look away. I accept. The devil blinked, then barked a laugh so loud it cracked the bones of his throne. So eager. So foolish. But perhaps, just foolish enough to succeed. He extended his hand, long and clawed, the air around it burning with invisible flame. Take it, he said. Bind yourself to the deal. You will serve the underworld until your task is complete, or until it devours you. Her heart thundered in her chest. Every instinct screamed to turn back, to flee into the shadows, to lose herself in whispers rather than bind herself to the devil. But beneath that fear was fire, the same fire that had kept her alive when they tore her soul apart. Slowly she raised her hand and placed it in his. Agony seared through her flesh the instant their skin touched. Black veins burst across her arm, spreading like lightning, and her vision filled with a blaze of red. Her knees buckled, but she did not cry out. She held his gaze, unyielding, until the pain subsided. When it was done, a mark like a burning sigil etched itself into her palm. It pulsed faintly, alive, as though it were watching her. The devil chuckled, releasing her hand. And so it is done. You are bound to me now by flame and by blood. Fail, and you will dissolve into nothingness. Succeed. He leaned close, his breath hot against her ear. And you may crawl out of my grasp with your soul intact. Perhaps even, rewrite your destiny. She staggered back, clutching her branded hand. Fear gnawed at her, but beneath it, a strange strength pulsed. She had not been silenced. She had not been broken. She had chosen. The devil returned to his throne, lounging as though the deal amused him more than anything. Your task will reveal itself soon, he said with a dismissive wave. The underworld hungers and it will find use for you. Until then, wander, little mortal. And pray the whispers guide you true. The blue flames dimmed, leaving her standing in near darkness. Her palm burned with the sigil, her fate sealed. She had entered a game no mortal was meant to play, with rules carved in suffering and blood. Yet for the first time since the ritual she felt the stirrings of control. The forbidden deal was hers, and with it, a chance to defy not just the devil but death itself. The pact had been sealed in whispers, etched not on parchment but into the marrow of her bones. The underworld did not grant promises without pain, and now her path twisted into the heart of shadows. She stood before a vast obsidian archway that seemed carved from night itself, its surface rippling like liquid darkness. Beyond it lay the trials, the price of the deal she had struck. The air thickened, heavy with the weight of unseen eyes. As she stepped through, the arch swallowed her whole, and the ground beneath her feet turned soft, like sinking into ash. The first trial came not with a roar of beasts but with silence. Around her, familiar figures began to emerge, her family. Their faces were pale echoes, eyes hollow, smiles twisted with mockery. Her father's voice, brittle and cruel, pierced the silence. "You were never wanted. We gave you away because you were already cursed." Her mother's shade leaned close, her words sharp as daggers. "A daughter who cannot be loved. Even the devil laughs at you." The illusions clawed at her heart, each word cutting deeper than any blade. She wanted to scream, to deny them, but their accusations were her secret fears made flesh. For a moment she faltered, her knees buckling under the weight of despair. But then she remembered the whispers, the spirits of the damned who had guided her here. Illusions. Shadows. Lies meant to chain you. She steadied her breath, straightened her spine and walked forward. The shadows of her family howled, reaching out with taloned hands, but their forms dissolved into smoke as she stepped through them, refusing to believe their venom. The second trial came with blood and bone. A monstrous figure rose from the ground, stitched together from the corpses of animals and men, its ribcage splitting open to reveal a furnace of fire. Its scream shook the earth and the stench of rot filled her lungs. In its hand, it carried a blade taller than her body. She had no weapon, only her will. But the underworld gave its chosen tools when they proved worthy. As the beast struck, she rolled across the ash, her hand closing around something sharp buried in the dirt. She pulled it free, a dagger black as midnight, its edge humming with forbidden power. The beast roared again, swinging its blade down. She met the strike, her dagger cutting through the monstrous steel as though it were mist. Shock flared in the creature's hollow eyes. Fueled by rage, grief, and the fire of survival, she drove the dagger into its chest, piercing the furnace of flame. The beast exploded into smoke and ash, leaving her gasping, trembling, but alive. Her body shook, drained by the battle, yet the underworld demanded more. The third trial was not of words or monsters but of choice. Before her appeared two doors, one carved of ivory, glowing faintly, the other of twisted bone, dripping with shadows. A voice whispered from both at once, ancient and cruel. "One door leads to freedom. The other to endless torment. Choose and pay the price." Her hands trembled. The ivory door called to her with hope, the promise of escape, the warmth of sunlight on her skin. But it was too perfect, too kind. The devil never gave without taking more. The door of bone pulsed with dread, yet it felt real, raw, dangerous. She closed her eyes and listened, not to the voices, not to the lies, but to the silence within herself. Her choice was made. She stepped through the door of bone. Agony ripped through her body as if her soul were being torn apart. She screamed, her voice echoing through the void, but she did not stop walking. Every step was fire, every breath a blade. And then, after what felt like an eternity of suffering, the pain subsided. She opened her eyes. She stood once more in the shadowy realm, dagger still in her hand, but something inside her had changed. Power burned in her veins, not borrowed but earned. The trials had not broken her, they had remade her. In the distance, she could already feel the devil's mocking smile waiting for her. But now, she was no longer the helpless soul he had mocked. She had tasted the trials of shadows and survived. The earth trembled the moment she clawed her way back into the world of the living. The veil between realms tore like fabric under strain, and she stumbled out, gasping, her lungs filling with air that felt both foreign and familiar. The soil clung to her hands, but it was no longer just soil. Its texture writhed, alive with whispers that echoed the underworld still stitched into her veins. She was no longer entirely human. Her skin bore the pallor of shadow, her eyes glowed faintly as if embers had taken root within them. In her reflection, caught in the surface of a stream, she saw her transformation. One half of her face radiant with the warmth of humanity, the other shrouded in a smoky darkness, shifting like liquid night. She was living proof of the deal she had struck, a creature of both realms. The villagers who had once known her would not recognize this version of her. Yet, recognition was not what she sought. She had returned with purpose. Her family had bartered her soul, sold her into the underworld to save themselves from ruin. The memory of their betrayal had been carved into her during the trials of shadows, a wound that burned even as the whispers of the damned urged her forward. Each step she took into her homeland sent fear rippling through the earth. Dogs howled. Infants wailed. Crops, once tall and green, bent unnaturally under a sudden wind. The people whispered of omens, of curses that followed the eclipse, not knowing that the curse now walked among them. At the edge of the village she paused. Her childhood home stood unchanged, the mud walls patched, the thatched roof sagging under years of rain. But to her it was no longer a home, it was the lair of those who had condemned her. The shadows clung tighter to her, coiling like snakes, urging her to unleash the vengeance she had earned. Yet, when she saw her mother's face at the doorway, weary and lined with guilt, a tremor of humanity surged within her. The shadows hissed, whispering, "Asterisk, they betrayed you. They must pay." Asterisk, but her heart, though fractured, still beat. And it remembered love once shared before greed and desperation corrupted it. Her father emerged behind her mother, his frame still broad though stooped with age. He froze when he saw her. His lips trembled, muttering a prayer to gods he had long abandoned. The siblings who had rejoiced in her departure peeked from behind him, their faces pale. They thought she was a ghost. "I am not dead," she said, her voice a strange harmony of mortal breath and spectral echo. "I walked where no living soul should walk. I returned with what you sold away." The ground quaked beneath her as she spoke. The shadows swirled, wrapping around her like a cloak, making her presence unbearable to gaze upon. Her brothers fell to their knees, begging for mercy. Her father clenched his fists but could not speak. And her mother wept silently as though her tears had been waiting years to fall. For a moment, silence reigned. Then the whispers returned, not from the shadows but from the villagers gathering at the edges, watching. They murmured her name, stories spreading like wildfire. Asterisk, she had returned. She had walked through death. She was no longer theirs, nor was she entirely mortal. Asterisk. The devil's laughter still echoed in her mind, mocking her, reminding her of the power she wielded but also of the chain tethering her to the underworld. She was not free, not yet. But she had returned to reclaim her fate, and to show those who betrayed her that she was no longer powerless. "I am neither your daughter nor your ghost," she declared, stepping closer, shadows darkening the sky above her. "I am what you made me. And I have come to claim the debt you owe." The family cowered, but she did not strike them down, not yet. Vengeance was not as simple as ending their lives. No, she had learned in the whispers of the underworld that true retribution came in the weight of fear, in the knowledge that betrayal would never be forgotten. As night fell, the villagers lit fires, though the flames bent away from her, refusing to touch her. They whispered of her as a herald, a creature who could bring ruin or salvation. Children clung to their mothers, while the elders murmured prayers to forgotten gods. She walked among them, half human, half shadow, her steps silent, her presence heavy. Some fled from her path. Others knelt. A few dared to meet her glowing eyes, only to find their courage dissolve under the echo of eternity reflected in her gaze. She did not linger in the village. She had returned, yes, but not to belong. Her purpose stretched beyond their narrow lives. The whispers of the damned still guided her, and they spoke of paths yet untrodden, of bargains unfulfilled, of a destiny not bound to soil or kin. At dawn, she stood on the hill overlooking the land, watching as the sun struggled to pierce through the shadows clinging to her form. Half of her basked in its warmth, the other half devoured it. This was her truth now. She was the threshold between worlds, a warning and a weapon. The people below would tell stories of her return, how the girl sold to the underworld came back bearing its mark. Some would fear her. Some would revere her. But all would remember. And as she turned away, leaving the village trembling in her wake, she whispered a vow to both the living and the damned. "They thought my fate was sealed. But I will write my own ending. And every shadow, every betrayal, every whisper of the underworld will serve me." Her journey was not over. It had only begun. The night of reckoning came with a sky torn between fire and shadow. The heavens above were heavy with a storm that did not belong to mortals. Clouds boiling, the moon bleeding red, and thunder rolling with voices that spoke her name. She stood at the threshold of her family's compound, her feet bare against the cracked earth, her eyes burning with the black fire of the underworld. The villagers had gathered, called by fear and curiosity. Whispers rippled through them like wind in dry grass. She returned, the one they betrayed, the one who struck a bargain with the dark. Mothers clutched their children. Old men pressed charms to their foreheads. But no one dared move. Her family waited inside, trembling behind the wooden gate. The father who sold her soul. The mother who stayed silent. The siblings who mocked her, who drank from the wealth her suffering bought. Their greed had burned her life away, and yet, here she was, more than mortal, something they could neither command nor understand. She raised her hand, and the gates swung open with a groan, as though the wood itself feared her. Her family stumbled into the courtyard, pale with terror. "Daughter," her father whispered, his voice broken. "Child, you live." "I do not live," she said, her voice echoing with two tones, the human softness she once had, and the dark resonance of the underworld. "And I do not die. You made certain of that when you sold my soul. But tonight I claim what is mine." Her siblings fell to their knees, crying for mercy. Her mother's lips moved in frantic prayer. But mercy was a language she had forgotten. Shadows spilled from her hands, curling like snakes across the ground. Flames burst from her breath, black and red, consuming the offerings her family once hoarded in secret chambers. Gold melted. Fine cloth burned to ash. Everything they stole, everything they thought eternal, turned to dust in the blink of an eye. "You wanted wealth," she said, advancing, her steps slow and inevitable. "You wanted power. You wanted a future without me. But your future ends tonight." Illusions twisted in the air around them, visions drawn from her trials in the underworld. Her family saw themselves buried alive, choking on soil. They saw chains binding their hands. They saw fire eating their flesh. They screamed, clawing at nothing as the shadows pressed those nightmares into reality. Her father reached for her, desperate, but she caught his arm. Fire raced up his body, devouring him as though he were nothing but paper. Her mother tried to run, but the ground split beneath her feet, and shadows dragged her screaming into the earth. Her siblings wailed, clutching each other until silence fell and only smoke remained. The villagers who had gathered fell to the ground, bowing, terrified. None dared speak. None dared breathe. They knew now that she was no longer a daughter, no longer a victim. She was legend. She stood in the ashes of her bloodline, the flames dying down around her. For a moment she felt the weight of what she had done, the severed ties, the finality of it all. But then she remembered the years stolen from her, the agony of betrayal, the endless nights of pain. This was not cruelty. This was justice carved in fire. Her voice rose above the silence, carried by both storm and shadow. "Let this night be remembered. Let no soul forget. Those who bargain with darkness cannot escape its price. And those who betray blood will find their own blood turned against them." The wind howled in answer. The earth rumbled. And the people whispered a name that would outlive generations, the daughter of fire and darkness. She walked away not as a girl, not as a ghost, but as something eternal. Her story would become a warning carved into the marrow of every child born after. She was not their victim. She was their curse. She was their reckoning.